I didn't wake up one morning and say, you know what I want to do? I want to start collecting video game consoles. That's not what started it. What started it really was something my roommate told me at the time. I was in my early 20s, and it was the it was the early to mid 90s, closer to the early 90s. And my roommate Matt had told me that Atari was coming off with a new video game system called the Jaguar, and it was going to be 64-bit. And I had grown up on Atari, so I thought that that was pretty interesting. The last time I had, really played a video game at home, I would have been 14, 15 years old, something like that. I might have picked up the Atari a little bit later than that, but never really seriously. The most serious that I was with that was when I was, between 12 and 14 years old. And anyway, my roommate had told me that Atari was coming out with a new system, the Jaguar. So I became interested. Well, he got his Jaguar almost, I think it was like a full year before the system was even available on the market. He was in cahoots with Atari. Him and our other friend Scott were in cahoots with Atari. He ended up making some software for them for their computers. But he had gotten his Jaguar 6 months to a year before they were even out in stores. And I was watching him play Cybermorph, and I said to myself at that point right there, looking at that, I said, I really want to get something. I want to, get back into the gaming thing a little bit. So I went out, and the first system that I got was a Sega Game Gear. Because I figured, my logic back then, I didn't know what I was doing. My logic back then was, well, get something portable, then you can take it anywhere you go. And so I picked up a Sega Game Gear because I compared that to a Game Boy. I was at Boscov's one day, and I compared the Game Gear to the Game Boy. And the Game Gear was color. So again, not knowing what I was doing back then, I said, I'll get the Game Gear. Well, then a little while later, I was at a toy store, and there was a Sega Master System. And this was at the tail end of the 16-bit era. But I saw a Sega Master System in a box on the top shelf in a toy store. I forget which mall exactly, but I asked for it, and I looked at it, and the price on it was $20. And the thing was still wrapped shrink wrapped, in the box. Got it brand new, never opened. And they had games there for it for $4 and $5. I got like 3 games with that, and it comes with a game built in. So, I cleaned up right there. And then a little while after that, I got the Sega Genesis. A little while after that, the Jaguar became available. The next generation came into being. I got the Jaguar, followed by the PlayStation, and pretty soon I look around, I see the commercials on the TV, I hear about all these games coming out, and it dawns on me that the only way you're going to be able to play all these games that they're advertising and all these cool games that you see is to have all these different systems, because you can't play it all on one system. So my thinking wasn't, I want to collect every video game console that there is. My thinking was, look, there's Nights into Dreams. I better have a Sega Saturn for that. Look, there's Tekken. I better have a PlayStation for that. Look, there's Iron Soldier. I better have a Jaguar for that. And that was the thinking. And then it wasn't until much later that I looked around and I saw these consoles sitting around, like an arcade, that it dawned on me, you know what? You should try to get as close to every game system that you can get, because these machines, they're really interesting. They really say something. They each have their own personality. Every one of them had a development team behind them. Every one of them had a plan behind them. Guys in suits sweating, trying to lock down, game arrangements with third-party developers and all that kind of thing. There were some that were interim machines, but a lot of them were supposed to be the next big thing. So it occurred to me that, I probably have more fun than anybody else in the world could possibly have with video games if I found every system that there was, or at least move towards that. Nobody can have every system that there is. So that's kind of how I started collecting. That was 20 years ago. It's been about 20 years since I started doing that. And now I have this massive console, platform, and device collection. I have 2,000 games. What is the difference between a console and a platform? I can sum it all up by talking about the Sega Genesis with the 32X adapter that plugs into it. You can play the 32X games. And the Sega CD that plugs into it. Okay. The Sega Genesis on its own obviously plays Sega Genesis games. If you attach the 32X device to the Sega Genesis, that's another platform, but that's not a console. The 32X doesn't operate on its own. It has to plug into a Sega Genesis. So that's another platform. The Sega CD, again, it's not a console by itself. The Sega CD is not a console. You have to plug it in. Now, obviously on the side there's things like the JVC XI that were dedicated CD players and the CDX and all that stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. Those are platforms. Originally, that's how they were made. And an even better example with that whole, like, keeping with that Sega setup, with the Sega Genesis, Sega 32X, and the Sega CD, there's another platform that arises there that can't be duplicated, and that is the Sega 32X CD. Very rare platform. I think they made 6 games for it or something like that. But that's another platform. That's not a console. There's no such thing as a Sega 32X CD console. At least not one available for commercial. That was ever available for commercial use. So in that sense, those are different platforms. The Sega 32X Genesis and CD thing actually plays 4 different platforms. It plays Sega Genesis carts, Sega 32X carts, Sega CDs, and Sega 32X CDs. My consoles and platforms, that's the way I look at it. It's either a console, a dedicated machine that plays the games that were made for it, or it's a platform, it's a periph that plugs into a console and allows it to play these other things as well. So that's, when I say consoles and platforms, that's what I'm talking about. A device is anything from a handheld to, a handheld can also be a console. But a device can be something like Nintendo Virtual Boy, or something like a handheld Coleco, one of the mini arcade machines that they had, like the Pac-Man or the Donkey Kong, things like that. Dedicated handheld gaming device. It's a device that plays games. It can be a smartphone. It can be a tablet. That's a device. So consoles, platforms, and devices. And that's what we're going to look at today. If you look around on the internet, you'll see collectors that collect consoles. The way similar to what I'm doing here. The difference is, many of those collectors have their consoles on shelves. Not plugged in, not connected to anything. They're just kind of on display in their basement because their wife wouldn't let them keep them in the living room. I like to share here on YouTube, my collection, but talking about it's not the big thing. But what I've done, because playing to me is the most important thing. My collection, a very large portion of it, is plugged in and readily playable. In other words, you turn on this television here, you turn on this console, maybe you hit a switch or something like that to, open the conduit, and boom, you put in a cartridge or a CD or a DVD or whatever format, and boom, you're playing. That's one of the differences in my collection that I see from other, collectors that have large massive collections. Many of theirs, they have to take out one console at a time and plug it in and play it and put it back when they're done. I don't like that. I'm too lazy for that. Collecting video games and consoles is something I started doing, again, because I like to play the games. That's what's important. Playing the games, becoming immersed, beating the game, feeling that satisfaction of knowing, a job well done. Yes, I collect because I want to play the stuff. I make the videos about it. If you look at my videos, they're very amateur. They're very, cheaply done. I don't spend a lot of time. It takes me about 2 hours from start to finish to do one of these videos. This video today will take a little longer, and I take a nap while it's uploading to YouTube. Usually on a Sunday morning. Yeah, I'm about playing and finishing and beating and the games. Okay, Otaku, we're going to look at the game systems in this room right now, and I'm going to point out that these game systems, I'll show you the TV that they're hooked up to. We have here a regionally modified Sega Saturn. We have here a Panasonic 3DO top loader, Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, Magnavox CDI. Up top here we have, if I can get some light up here, maybe I can, maybe I can't, Neo Geo, AES. We have here a Neo Geo CD, right there. And of course we have the sticks for them, right here. Coming down a little lower, we have back here a Nintendo Super Famicom. Nintendo Famicom. We come all the way down to the low level here. We have back here Atari 800 XL home computer, Atari 130 XE home computer, got a Sega Genesis controller hooked up to it there, Commodore 64 home computer. Down here we have a TI-99 4A home computer, and the bottom shelf down here we have disk drives for Atari and Commodore right there. Moving down to the lower level, we have a Japanese Sega Dreamcast, a Sony PlayStation, the original Sony PlayStation, that's Japanese also, and an American Sega Dreamcast. Okay, that's the bottom shelf. Over here I have an Acer Iconia tablet. Now, while this isn't plugged in, it is, I can plug it in. It's readily playable, though. You turn it on, and it uses this joypad here, and I can connect it using HDMI to any of several HD televisions in here. And, of course, these devices, starting back over here, we'll go through this again, through all these right here, and here, and here, here, here. All of these are connected to this television here. They all share. So that's 16 devices. 16 consoles sharing this television, and then the tablet, of course, is its own thing. And that's this section of the room here. Okay. Over here on this TV, this is a... this is an LG 32-inch, 60 frames a second, 1080p HD television. And over here we have the original Xbox, a PS3, switch box there, an Xbox 360. Right here we have the camera for the PS3, and two, if you look there, you see two Wii motion bars. One for the Wii and one for the Wii U, as we will see down here. We come down here, we have a Wii. Connect camera sensor. Okay, we have the move apparatus and the Wii motion control and all that stuff. Come all the way down here to the bottom. We have a PS2. And we have here a Pioneer Laser Active. These things are great. They're rare, kind of pricey, but they play laser discs games, Sega CD, Sega cartridges for Genesis. This pack thing right here pops out, and they have a TurboGrafx version also. I don't have that, but I have the Sega Genesis, the Sega Genesis and Sega CD apparatus for this. And of course, the all-new Wii U. 7 different machines tethered to this television. The Pioneer Laser Active, of course, has the Sega CD and the carts built in, but you know, we already kind of went through that. I have a bunch of things that play Sega CD and Sega cartridges. Moving on. Okay, and here we are over on this section here. And we're going to look at what's going on over here. First we have JVC XI, which right now is running AX101, which is what you're seeing right here. And this is the official JVC XI with the, you can see the, maybe you can see the JVC controller there versus a Sega controller. This is the actual JVC device here, and this plays Sega carts and CDs, not 32X though. No 32X anything on that. Here we have a PCFX by NEC, Nintendo GameCube, Game Boy Playa underneath there going on, American Sony PlayStation 1, the redesign, which is right now running Iron Soldier 3 down here. One of my favorite games from the Jaguar was Iron Soldier. Sega 32X and Sega Genesis right here. Over here, we will ignore this for now. We have a Dyna 2-in-1, and this is this plays ColecoVision as well as Sega SG-1000 games, all in one console, which is kind of neat. 8 more platforms over here. So what do we have? 16 and 7 and 8 is 31. Looks like we're doing 31. We're up to 31 plugged in, ready to rock consoles and platforms. Not bad. And if we come over here, we have another Sony PlayStation 1, but this has its own screen built in right here, and you just throw a controller in it and boom, you're ready to rock. But that's, we already have that, but this is more portable. You can actually take this with you. Okay, lots of action going on in this room. And before I go into the consoles here, we'll just let you know I got 5 CRT televisions. And of course this thing here has its own monitor. But sharing these 5 CRT televisions and 1 HD television at 720p 26-inch that are plugged in ready to play, a TurboGrafx 16, The elusive Canadian-only Wii Mini. Sony PlayStation 3. The original. We have a Japanese Sega Saturn. We have a Japanese Sega Mega Drive. Sega Master System 2. Atari 5200. Atari 2600. Atari 7800 Pro System. Down here we have the ham sandwich sized PC Engine. NEC PC Engine. Same thing as the TurboGrafx, only 1/4 of the size. This mess is the Sega Genesis, 32X, and Sega CD. This actually plays 4 different platforms. We already counted 3 of these before, so we'll only count the 32X CD when we do our count here. Jaguar with the Jaguar CD. 2 more platforms. We have here a Intellivision, Intellivision 2, which are basically the same thing. This one, the Intellivision 2, is smaller, but it does lock out certain games. We have a Canadian ColecoVision. We have one of my prides and joys here, a Mattel Aquarius computer. In the same family as the Mattel Intellivision here, you see the similar design. Also plugged in and playable is the Atari 400 computer, Atari 800 computer, and down here we have a Magnavox Odyssey 2. I will point out that this device here, the Nintendo Virtual Boy, is plugged in and playable, and it's at about the right height. You can just walk right up to it, stick your head right in there, and boom! Not a very comfortable thing to sit and do. It's kind of clumsy if you do that. It actually works best if you can get it to the height of your head, where you just slide your head on in there. And this one is hardwired. It does receive juice. All you got to do is throw the game in there and turn on the on switch right here, and you're jamming. And this is a Yabo NES clone. I play my NES games out here on there. Here we have a GCE Vectrix. Has its own monitor, vector graphics system. So we're looking at another 22 plugged in playable consoles and platforms. This PS3 actually has a different account attached to it. Separate accounts, separate machines. Okay, Otaku, so far we're looking at about 53 plugged in playable consoles and platforms. That's not even counting, handhelds that, of course, are playable. You pick them up and you play them. So we're moving on. Okay, now, Otaku, we're going to look at some of the game consoles that are not plugged in, but are perfectly playable, nonetheless. This is a Sega SG-1000 Mark II. Quite rare, but not that expensive. This is an Atari Video Pinball, model C380. The Video Pinball sticker that's supposed to be there is gone, but it's a pinball game. Okay, and those are not plugged in. This is a Sega CDX right here. And this isn't plugged in. This plays Sega CDs and Genesis carts. It's also a portable CD player. This was a gift from my brother, Jazz Fan 5000. You can see him right here on YouTube. This is also not plugged in, but this does have a 6-button controller, cables to a television, and a nice leather case that actually he gave to me with it. And that's the Sega CDX, not plugged in. This is a Commodore VIC-20 that is currently not in use. I do keep it around. I do have some games for it. Here's a rarity. This is a Nintendo Color TV Game 15. I did a review on this. You can check it out right here on this channel on Go Mega Otaku Gamer Alpha. Very rare Nintendo Japanese import. Here is a Coleco Telstar Alpha. And this is it's a Pong type clone thing. Here you got your knobsies here, and you got your crappy here. You got tennis, hockey, handball, and Jai-alai. Yeah, I know it's high-alai, but I think it should be called Jai-alai. Okay, so and you can do beginner, intermediate, and pro settings for that. And there's the good old Coleco logo right there. Here we have an Atari XE game system. Now this one, the keyboard is currently dead. However, I do think that a friend of mine has remedied this, and it does appear that I have another one that's going to replace this keyboard that works. And that'll be nice, and then I'll be able to do a full review on this system like I've wanted to do. And here's the gun. I have about 1 million Atari controllers lying around. I could easily pair one of those with this system, but I choose to if I have the option, to get Genesis controllers to pair with Atari products, because you get so much better control. If I want to show the thing off, okay, I got Atari joysticks lying around. I could pair one of those with this. I have a large assortment of compatible joysticks I could put with this, but I choose Sega Genesis controller for playing, because, as I said before, I'm about playing these things. I'm not necessarily just about showing them. I'm showing them now, but it's all about playing for me. And this will most likely be reviewed this year sometime. I'm thinking probably, if not first quarter, then early second quarter. But look for it. I'll be talking about this, the Atari XE game system. And here we have some curious little devices. I did a special episode on these. These are little classic, handheld and tabletop games of the 80s and whatnot. Here we have a Pac-Man from Coleco. Here we have a Pac-Man from Tomy. Different approaches, different Pac-Man, completely different approaches. Quite good. We have classic basketball from Mattel. We have Football 1, as opposed to all the other footballs that are out there, also from Mattel. Mattel, again, with the Missile Invader. And when they say Invader, they do mean Invader. It's one Invader. And this is a curious little device here. A friend of mine got this for me a few years back. This is a Westminster 256 games in one. It uses little dots, similar to like real large computer pixels, to make its images, and a lot of the images are just real simple, like Space Invader-y type, snakey type things that it does, but it has 256 different variations of these games. So those are some interesting little tidbits. Everything that I've shown you here today works. Not just these small devices, but everything that I'm showing you here today works, or I won't show it. If it doesn't work, one of my rules is if something stops working, it immediately and unceremoniously gets flung into the trash can without so much as shedding a tear. If it doesn't work, it doesn't belong here. Old machines come here to die. When they're dead, and they get an unceremonious flinging burial into the trash with you. Wha-bam! So what do you say, Otaku? How about we get into some handheld fare? Some handheld devices. And let's just get crazy and not even bother doing it in any kind of particular order. Well, maybe. Sort of. Something like that. We'll figure it out as we go. Let's get into some handhelds. And we're back with some handhelds. Last year I grouped my handhelds together and did like the fast demonstration of all of them. Showed them all off real quickly. I put all the Nintendo devices together. I'm going to do a little different this year. It's going to be just kind of scattershot. This is a Nokia N-Gage Mark II. This is a Game Boy Advance. And while I usually don't do this kind of thing, I usually don't show you when I have doubles. I'm showing this one off because this is the rare NES design for Game Boy Advance. I have one of those as well. Some of these machines I have doubles of. In the Atari 2600 episode that I did, you saw I showed my Black Vader along with the Rainbow Junior. But I'm trying to limit that. I also have a regular NES aside from the Yabo clone, but I have that packed away, and I really don't feel like digging that out. So anyhow, and this is a Nintendo DSi. Okay. Here we have a Sony PSP Mark III. And these, despite the fact, they sold a decent number of these, they just didn't sell that many games with them. And, the game developers really didn't want to, develop for this thing because they just didn't have a game. They didn't have, that many units sold. And it only has one stick, and this stick is horrible. In hindsight, they probably could have done a lot better designing this. This is a Nintendo DSi, DS Lite. Here we have the Game Boy attachment. You port there for Game Boy games. Okay, moving on with some more handhelds here. Here we have a Wonder Swan. And this is a Ganbai Yokoi production. I love saying that. Father of the Game Boy brought us this. He also brought us this. The Wonder Swan Color. Okay, and these are Japanese imports, these Wonder Swan things. Here we have, speaking of Japanese imports, a Game Boy Light. You're thinking, oh, okay, Game Boy Light, that means it's smaller than a Game Boy. Well, it is, but it also is the only Game Boy that was ever backlit. They didn't backlight Game Boys until the Game Boy Advance came along. But this is just like your normal Game Boy. It's a little smaller. Not quite a Game Boy Pocket. A little bit bigger than a Game Boy Pocket. Not quite the size of a regular Game Boy. But it had a light. It had a backlight. Japan only. And the Japanese Game Boys play American games. And the American Game Boys play Japanese games and vice versa. There's no difference there. Speaking of Game Boy Pocket, here's a Game Boy Pocket. A little bit smaller than the Game Boy Light. We'll put them together. You can see that the Game Boy Pocket, if you line it up right there, you see it's a little bit smaller. I'll turn it sideways. The the Game Boy Pocket is a little slimmer, a little bit smaller. Okay, so Game Boy Pocket. Next we have, this is a Neo Geo Pocket Color from SNK. All things Neo Geo. This was the year that I expanded my collection into the Neo Geo realm completely and thoroughly, getting all things Neo Geo. This is a great little system. Instead of the rocker switch, you have an actual joystick that sounds just like, uses the same kind of noisy clickety-click technology they have on their arcade joystick that they include with their home consoles. A Game Boy Advance. I'll say again, some of these handhelds, many of these handhelds have doubles, but I'm not going to get into that. We're just going to show them here. This is the Game Boy Color. First color Game Boy system. This is the Nintendo DS Fat. Yeah, baby. I remember when I first got this, how just incredible I thought this was. I still do. It's amazing. I mean, touchscreen technology. I up until that point, who would have thought of that? DS Fat. And speaking of fat, it's the brick, the original portable brick, the original Nintendo Game Boy, the granddaddy of portable gaming entertainment right there for you. This is a Watara Supervision, and this thing tilts like this. You can tilt it so that the screen faces up. This is Chinese made. By supervision, I'm sure they don't mean somebody looking over your shoulder to make sure you're playing it right. But this is a handheld portable. This was when the Game Boys were out and they were $100. This was $50. This never stood a chance against the Game Boy, though. I have one game for this, and that was hard enough to get. Games for this are kind of hard to get. If anybody wants to send me any, feel free. Here we have a PC Engine GT. And this is the Turbo Express in America. But this is the Japanese version here. This played the exact same games that you played on the PC Engine. Take it out of the PC Engine in the home, put it in this portable thing. This had a TV tuner that attached to the back of it, etc. It was a real chump. It looked like if you ever saw any of the Sony portable TVs like from this era. These get pricey, quite pricey. I lucked out when I paid what I paid for this one. Here is the rare and elusive Game Boy Micro. I have the Skulls skin on this one. They have different. It is actually a plate that comes off. I have 3 different kinds. The Skulls one is the one I usually keep on here. Plays Game Boy Advance games. Game Boy Advance games only, not Game Boy games. This is a Nintendo, 3DS. Right on. A Nintendo DSi XL. You saw the DSi. This is the big dog. Big dog. Okay, as I said, I have every single Nintendo handheld. I don't have any of the Game & Watch systems. I'm talking about every single Nintendo handheld that you can swap games in and out of. And speaking of XL, here is the 3DS XL. This is large. You can see it's a bit larger than the 3DS is here. Okay, anyway, 3DS XL. And that's what that looks like. Nice and big, beautiful screen. If you compare that screen to something like, say, the PlayStation Vita, you'll see that the top screen there is about the same size as the Vita's screen. If not, maybe, they're about the same size. PlayStation Vita. The new handheld. I have this this case for this one that turns it into it looks like a joystick type thing. It actually enhances the gameplay quite a lot. It makes it much better, which is why I just kind of leave it on there. It works so much better that way. It really does. Okay, here we have a second generation iPod Touch. This has gaming capabilities as well. I have a few games on here. Right. Here I have my old Samsung Galaxy Precedent phone. This phone has some gaming capabilities, as well as, internet connectivity and stuff like that. And even though I don't have the phone service for this phone anymore, I can still use it to connect to the internet via the Wi-Fi, and I can use the Bluetooth and all the other features, and I can still download games for it. I have I have games on here. And this is my current phone. This is the Samsung Galaxy S2. Not a brand new phone, older phone, but yet, by the same token, still has good gaming capabilities. Games on there are quite good. Nothing spectacular. I don't really load it up with the real spectacular games like I do. My tablet that I showed you earlier, I have some spectacular games on there. Now we're going to take a look at some little devices, strange little devices. And some of these have doubles, but again, I'm not going to go into the doubles. I'm just going to show you the devices. This is a Commodore 64. gaming emulator joystick device. It has Commodore 64 games on it. This is an Atari paddle. Has Atari paddle games on it right here. Okay. And this is a fine kettle of fish. This is the Power Joy. It's made in Brazil. At first glance, it looks kind of like a Nintendo 64 controller, but then you see this thing on the front here, zap, 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 and and a trigger right there. So it's a gun. It's actually, you plug it in to your television, and it's a gun game. You shoot at the screen. And there's some games built into it. And if you don't like the games that are actually on here, I don't think they're actually Nintendo games that are on here or any kind of real, well-known games. But if you don't like the games that are on here, you can flip this sucker over, and you can put in, it plays Famicom games right here. Famicom games, not NES games, but Famicom. And this runs on batteries. Whoops. And here's the battery port right here. But that's the Power Joy, made in Brazil. Okay, Otaku, we're getting down there to devices that really have no gaming capability, but are still interesting. And I still collect these because this is a Sinclair ZX81. It has gaming capability, but I just don't have it rigged up for that. I just have the unit. The unit plugs into the TV. I don't have the tape drive or any of that stuff, but this is a funky little unit. In this country, it was called the Timex Sinclair 1000. In Europe, it was known as the ZX81. I just kind of have it. It's because it's an interesting machine. Now, here's a fine little, dandy little thing. This is a Apple PowerBook. Old Apple laptop. Weighs a ton. Here's a mouse for it. And here's the stupid power supply that they had. Whoever designed this should have this thing wrapped around his lips and yanked up over his head. This is a neat little machine, but this is a terrible this is bad design right here. Okay, that should never have seen the light of day. But this keyboard is interesting. You can see through the keys, and they're going for that high-tech look. Here's your pad and your clickers and all this stuff. And this has like just a little bit of memory. I think it's like 256 meg of onboard, or maybe 512 or something like that. Apple logo all over the place. This is when you close the lid. You saw the way the lid opened. The Apple is facing this way instead of, the modern Apple computers. The Apple's the other way. So when the lid is open, okay, the Apple's right side up instead of down. And they put an Apple on the bottom also that is also upside down. But that is a Apple PowerBook. Moving on. This is from the early 2000s. This is an interesting device. This is a Vugo. And what this was, it was a toy. You got this in toy stores. You could connect this to your television, and you could record television shows. It comes with these cables here. And you plug it in, and there's what is it here? There's an SD card slot in the top. Let's see if I can get that open. Yeah, right there. You slide your SD card, I think it did up to a gig, and you could record whatever TV show, and then you could watch it on this screen. Now, what sucked about these was the resolution. You could barely see. Okay, if you look here, this is a Palm Pilot cradle that is then plugged into this PC right here, this old gateway. I've been working on a project trying to get a virtual machine so that I can plug this baby into a computer and swap like text files and stuff on and off it. So that's like an ongoing Frankenstein project that I have. This is an old Palm Pilot. I'm trying to do this so you don't see my reflection holding the camera in it. It's so bright in here. This is an old Palm Pilot, the original, or maybe like second generation. This is when they were with 3Com. And it has, all the bells and whistles here. Connection down here. Has a stylus right here. Okay, that you can write on the screen. It does this rudimentary, it reads this rudimentary writing. You have to basically relearn how to, write your letters like you did in second grade. There's a certain way you have to do it for it to read it. But this is an interesting device. This is a gift from a friend. This was brand new in the box, and it's still brand new. It works like it's brand new, and it's quite awesome. It has this neat little leathery sheath here that it slides into, and there you go. I wrote it on my palm. Now I'd like to take a couple of moments and talk about PC gaming. Okay, and don't get me wrong, console gaming is still the king. PC gaming is a pain. It's difficult. I'll illustrate this by saying this. If you buy Grand Theft Auto 4 for your PlayStation 3 and you put the thing in there, you're going to be able to play it. If you buy Grand Theft Auto 4 for your PC and you put it in there, there's a long rigmarole. You got to join this, you got to join that, you have to join the Rockstar community, blah, blah, blah. I bought a copy of Grand Theft Auto 4 for my PC, and I'll be damned if I can play it. It won't, it doesn't sign me up. When I do try to sign in, it says that it doesn't recognize me and blah, 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 after I already signed up. Should recognize me. I don't see why it doesn't. So PC gaming, actually, they're making it harder and harder for you to game on PCs, and some of these consoles are starting to follow suit now. This next generation of consoles will be interesting to see how many of them lock out used games and how many of them allow you to play those used games. But nonetheless, PC gaming is difficult. When I talk about PC gaming, I'm talking about purchasing a game, playing it in the PC. I'm not talking about emulation. Emulation is something that's free, that anyone can do. That's not the same thing as what I do. What I do is collect, okay? And I purchase these things in one form or another, either online or in a store or something, and then I own, as much as you can own games these days, but a lot of those older games, you do own them. But then I own that game. That's my copy. That's not someone else's copy. I'm not streaming that from somewhere. That's not out of someone else's library. That's out of my library. Allow me to illustrate the difference by comparing Steam to the OnLive service. That I don't know if it's still around or not. It doesn't matter. We'll just compare the two things. Steam, you buy the game. You join Steam. You buy the game. You own it. OnLive, you join OnLive and then you play from their library of games. That's like going over to your friend's house and playing his games. Those aren't yours. Steam, those games are yours. You paid for them. They're saved to your PC. You have a copy of them. Oftentimes, some of those you can buy in the store. For example, Red Faction Armageddon. You can buy that in a store. You have to be a member of the Steam community, but you can play those. That is the kind of PC gaming that I do. That, and I have some a little bit older PC gaming that I do. I have one of the PCs that I have is, the specs of it are more like, it's able to run games that are more like PlayStation 1 type games, like Need for Speed 3, Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace, stuff like that. And I'll point out those PCs right now. And here we go. This is an eMachine computer, this PC here. This is the machine I play the older games, like Phantom Menace, Star Wars Phantom Menace, Need for Speed 3, games like that. Again, games that were purchased, that were put on here. I don't say that I don't do emulation, I do, but I don't count that as part of my collection. That's there's no point in that. Those aren't, anybody can do that. That's really pointless. Going down here. Probably you can't see that well. This is the other PC. There's the screen for it. But this PC actually has a graphics card. It's ATI, what is it? Radeon 46 something. But nonetheless, it has HDMI out, and it also heads out. I have it split out to this HD TV, and I get 1080p at 60 frames from this. Or on this screen here, I can get 720p at 60 frames using the DVI. And this PC, I play games like Red Faction Armageddon, the latest, what's his name, Duke Nukem game. I have the Steam service on here. It's a good service. I've bought a few games on here. I have Nights into Dreams, which looks a lot better on here than it does on the Sega Saturn. So that's when I talk about PC gaming, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actual purchased games that you collect, similar to buying a game for your console. You also download games for your console, but that's like the Steam service. The Steam service, you download games for your PC. So that's that's what I mean by PC gaming. So there you have it, Otaku. That is the 2013 rundown of my massive console collection. Consoles, platforms, and devices. See you next time.